Hello, my fellow thinkers and dreamers. This is Mind Palace Musings, and I am your host, David Wellman. Now, imagine the following. You close your eyes for a brief moment, and opening them, you find yourself to be in a theatre house. Although this is no ordinary theatre house, and there is no ordinary play going on, for you see, you are the audience, you are the actors, you are the stagehands, and you are also the director. In this episode, we are going to focus on two entities, the actor and the observer. As I mentioned at the end of the previous episode, this one's going to be a bit lighter. Well, maybe. I say that now, we'll see how it ends. So, what do I mean by actor and observer? Well, we'll get there. Firstly, some assumptions. And there's only two for today. Assume nothing, and question everything. As one could reasonably expect from me labeling such entity as an actor will, well, act. It is something that performs actions. Observers, on the other hand, as you might have already guessed, will observe. These entities work well in theory, where we can construct theoretical situations in which something will act without observing its actions. And usually an observer will also have some level of action. But bear with me for now. We will get to why this is important in just a little bit. So, to quote age-old philosophy, if a tree falls in the woods and no one is there to hear it, does it make a sound? And this sounds like one of those things that someone said a long time ago to sound deep. Yeah, it probably does make a sound because the tree smashing into the ground is going to release sound waves. Now, that does beg the question, if those sound waves are then not absorbed by anyone's ear, is it actually heard? And I suppose this is the whole point of why this is such a famous philosophical quote. I'd like to say that maybe the simulation doesn't even render it if no one is there to witness it. Or maybe if you come across a fallen tree in the woods, it was just like that. You don't know. Back to our grand theatre house, we look at the audience. Now, based on the two entities described earlier, it is quite easy to then label the audience as the observer. It makes sense. They are there to watch a play. They observe the action going on the stage. But it is through their own action that they are at the theatre. And without them being there at the theatre, there would be no play unfolding. Now, whether we look at that in such a sense that without their desire to watch a play, without their desire to observe action, there would be no demand for the play, there'd be no demand for this action, and therefore it would not exist. Or we could go with the whole simulation not rendering what they are seeing, which, is a bit out there, I suppose, depending on your beliefs. But what we can draw from that is it's not always easily identifiable as to what labels we should apply to these entities at any given time. And as mentioned earlier, while the actor may need to observe its own actions, so too the observer may need to act in order to put itself in a position from which to observe. Now, if you have not already assumed, I will be saying the word actor and observer and act and observe a lot in this recording, which I'll apologize for now and not again. But David, what of the actors? The show must go on. Yes, so we've spoken about the audience. Now let's speak about the actors. I'm sure you know where this is heading. I'm going to tell you that from the offset, we might label the actors as actors, but the actors are playing out according to a script. They are moving, but their actions are not their own. They are not currently choosing to perform what they want to be doing at that given time. Taking out from the equation that obviously the actor enjoys acting, this is an imaginary entity that has no personality or wants or desires. Also known as myself in 2018. Oh yeah, depression joke. Moving on. So that also now pulls into the equation the question that the observers are there in the hall to watch this action. If the actors had decided to change their path and perform actions that were not in the script, it would throw the entire system out of balance, and obviously that does not work. So the actors are actually acting as observers to their own actions, and it's more or less out of their control to act differently unless they want to throw the system out of balance. And they act for those observers watching them, because otherwise their actions would have no medium on which to exist. If they were just acting in an empty hall, there'd be no point. You may, of course, be wondering where I'm going with all of this, and I'd be surprised if you hadn't arrived at the obvious conclusion of quantum mechanics. Quantum mechanics can be described as the branch of mechanics that deals with the mathematical description of the motion and interaction of subatomic particles, incorporating the concepts of quantization of energy, wave-particle duality, the uncertainty principle, and the correspondence principle. I just said a lot, and I don't really know what a lot of it means, but that's okay, because I'm going to boil it down and make it a bit easier to digest, and also, I promise, make it make sense with the whole actor-observer thing I just spent the last 6 minutes describing to you. So back in the 17th century and before, we kind of existed in a state where things could just kind of happen because no one had really concreted the rules of physics or science yet, until one Sir Isaac Newton was strolling along and saw an apple falling out of a tree and said, "Nuh-uh, don't like that." And then he spent his whole life dedicated to explaining why that happened. Now, I'm, of course, romanticizing, exaggerating, and also probably straight up lying in some cases. But the point is, he invented what we call classical physics, which is what we used to describe physics before Einstein came along, and basically shattered everything with his theory of relativity. And then came quantum mechanics. Now, classical physics and modern physics can be used to describe how objects, or just mechanics in general, play out at a normal scale. But when it gets too small, we need to use quantum mechanics. Now, for those who are into science, you might know where I'm going, but for those that aren't, I'm going to say it out for you. The weird thing about quantum mechanics is that at that scale, simply observing a particle can change its state. Now, I never used to understand how the fuck that happened. I didn't understand what it meant. I sitting here thinking about these voyeuristic particles that get hot and bothered when you look at them, which, now that I have had those words come out my mouth, actually isn't too far from the truth. Basically, at that size, if you were to hit a particle with a beam of light, it's enough energy to change the state. And to observe something, we must be able to bounce light off of it. That's how we see things. What you see in the world is light bouncing off of everything, which is also invitation to deny everything, because what you are seeing might not actually be how it looks and just how your brain is making it look, which I'm going into Jaden Smith territory here. But anyway, so back to actors and observers. In this case, we have a relatively inert particle that becomes an actor once we observe it. And the mere action of observing it changes how it acts. It acts differently because it's being watched. And while in the traditional science world, that would only apply for quantum mechanics, we can apply this to society at large, which I don't think was ever the intention when someone said, what if science but way smaller? But nevertheless, I'm going to bastardize this even further and explain what I mean. So, speaking about actors and observers in the modern real world, I'm going to talk about social media, or in some cases what I would call anti-social media. And of course, I don't mean antisocial in terms of being less social, because that is asocial, and it is surprising how many people get that wrong, and I'm being pedantic. Antisocial in the sense that it makes us act less social. It's damaging for a healthy social environment. In the example of the actor being forced to act in such a way that it would work for the observer that has put themselves in that position to witness a specific act play out, it's the same that people seem to portray these very glamorized, shallow existences. It's something that is an issue because people will, of course, only ever publicize the absolute best times of their life, and people will see this thinking that these people are just living these absolutely fantastic, amazing lives, when that's typically not the case, obviously. Human existence is, by and large, a thing of suffering. Not for everyone, of course, but, you know, we all suffer to different calamities. Now, of course, these people would not be acting in such a way if they were no observers waiting to receive it. It's by having observers wishing to witness this kind of content that more and more actors will pop up to play this game, and they are probably typically not always acting in a way that they want to. But of course, being good actors, they have to put on a happy face and go through it. Now, of course, this could be extended to celebrities at large, but, you know, it also goes down to older and lower levels. I mean, as long as the internet has existed, there's been trolls, and the age-old adage is always, do not feed the troll, which, you know, back to my quantum theory example, if you do not observe the particle, it does not get any energy and the state will not change. If you just ignore a troll, then it won't be able to do anything. It's like the tree falling in the woods, no one's hearing it. And I think much can be said of the same of unplugging yourself, even if it's just for short periods of a time. But if you just unplug yourself from these highly publicized social medias, you typically are going to feel a lot better. And I'm not the only one who says this. There is research that supports it as well. I'll start with the most boring research being done, the physical downsides, which is that scrolling through social media typically causes us to sit more, and sitting is bad for you because, you know, humans are meant to be in the forest picking berries and hunting boars and not sitting in chairs. So let's talk about the psychological aspects. First things first, these social medias are addictive as hell, and I say this as someone who is probably never going to be able to kick my nasty Reddit habit, but, you know, humans are filthy dopamine monkeys, and we just want our next fix. Now, the problem is, if you are getting your next fix from comparing your own life to someone else's, it's very bad for you. It leads to feelings of social isolation. It leads to this vicious cycle of jealousy, saying, this person is happy, why can't I be happy? And it leads to feelings of inequality in ourselves. It leads us to wonder what's wrong with us. Studies have also been done on the long-term mood of participants, where those frequently using social media are less happy. And as mentioned, they are caught up in this self-destructive, depressive cycle. And I can pull from my own personal experience in this regard. I grew up as the fat kid, and I'm not saying it's gotten much better, but I'm at least not miserable about it anymore. I grew up trying to seek approval on these platforms and not understanding why I was not getting any attention, why people didn't seem to want to talk to me. And it's gotten a lot better since I've just decided that I don't want to broadcast my happiest moments. I don't want my happiness to be at the whims of others. I don't want to judge my experiences based on how Instagrammable they are or how many likes they get. And living in such a way has made me so much happier, because it puts happiness in your own hands, and you're no longer stuck in this pattern or thought loop that you need to now interrupt these amazing moments you're having because you've got to take a picture, got to take a video. And of course, memories are great. It's great to take pictures and videos to remember that beachside trip forever, but take them and put them in a picture frame. But they definitely don't need to go up on the internet forever, for everyone to see, for the ever-hungry eyes, for the algorithms that just wish to chomp all the data they can get, to analyze every single pixel, to see how they can better sell you processed sugar and cheap shoes and electronics and adverts. Oh my word, so many adverts. Now, it's a bit of a meme to say, oh, technology bad. Look how better these days were when instead of smartphones we had newspapers. I'm not saying that. Smartphones are fantastic. The internet is great. At this point in my life, I have access to more information at my fingertips than any of my ancestors have had combined. No, maybe I'm not going to make that joke. So the final thing I want to talk about before rounding this episode out is altruism, and the fact that a lot of people seem to want observers in order to act in altruistic manners, and it's good and bad. Obviously, it's good if more people are sowing more good into the world, but if the energy behind it isn't genuine, then you have to wonder what they're putting out there. If someone is only cleaning up trash off the streets or giving money to the needy or providing food to the hungry because they think it'll make them look good, you have to wonder what they're doing behind closed doors. You have to wonder what point in this person's life they're at that they feel the need to broadcast their altruistic actions. If you want to do something good for someone, just do it, and you don't have to tell the world about it. Be the actor without an observer. As is usual, I'll end off the episode with several implications. You may have more control over a situation than you realize, and you may have less control over a situation than you realize. In cases where you think you might be the actor, you might actually be the observer, and vice versa. By providing witness to something, you may be allowing action to happen in the first place, and without your observation, that action may have never happened in the first place. Actions do not require observation, and it is often actions that are not observed that carry more weight than those that are observed. And every time a action is performed that is easily observed, you might want to think of what it might be hiding. Because if your eyes are focused on this action, they won't be focused on something else going on. My dear seekers of truth and knowledge, thank you for listening to my ramblings once again. I'm slowly getting more and more comfortable with this whole podcasting thing, and I'm definitely enjoying it. Please always stay curious and keep asking questions. This has been Mind Palace Musings, and I have been your host, David Wellman.